Welcome to Just Minding My Business Media, LLC. Broaden the scope of exposure for your business by going beyond the interview. Learn more at www.jmmbmediallc.com or email us at jmmbradio@gmail.com. Sales are contingent upon the attitude of the salesman, not the attitude of the prospect. W. Clement Stone. Today we welcome Bocar Dia. Bocar Dia is a thought leader within the go-to-market landscape, being a sales coach at the Harvard Business School, revenue.fyi, and scaling100.com. He was an early employee at Hootsuite, starting as a sales rep, pre-revenue, leading multiple go-to-market teams throughout its growth to 150 million plus annual recurring revenue, 1,500 plus employees. As managing director of Forum Ventures, Bocar supports 30 plus early stage founders each year on a one-to-one basis to establish their customers and gain rapid traction. Welcome, Bocar.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, welcome. Wow. This is definitely interesting because, you know, that first time business, there's some fear, there's a whole lot of stuff going on that sometimes, you know, we can't focus on what we need to be focused on. So it can get really, really tense, for lack of a better word.
That's correct.
So what made you decide to do this type of work? Let me just ask.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. First off, thanks for having me. Happy to share my story today. So my background is actually that I am an engineer that didn't really want to be one. In that I always knew that I wanted to be in tech, but I didn't really want to be a software developer. I was lucky enough to started a company called Hootsuite. So it was early pre-revenue, and I saw the company scale from the very beginning all the way to about 150 million and a valuation above $1 billion. And I was lucky enough to see just how to really think about early customer acquisition and actually validating that the business idea that you have is one that you should actually capitalize on. So I can expand on that a little bit later. But also one of the things that I discovered in my time there was that while there's a lot of advice out there on how to build the right product, there isn't really as much advice that's available to founders and entrepreneurs on really how to figure out the sales and go-to-market aspect of things. So since the beginning, I've kind of made it my mission to really focus on that. At Hootsuite, that was my focus. I was focusing on a lot of early verticals that we're going after, early products that we're launching, really figuring out, should we even be building this product? How do we acquire our first customers? Then how do we actually build a repeatable sales and go-to-market model in order to actually scale the company? And for the better part of the last 15 years, I've been advising founders between their early stages all the way to about their second round of funding on really just kind of how to figure out their go-to-market. So sales is my passion. I have a little bit of a go-to-market tilt to this. When I think about what I do today, so just for context for everyone, Forum Ventures is an early stage fund and accelerator. So we invest in over 100 companies a year. So very high volume of companies that we invest in. But because our model is also very hands-on, that means that I get to work very closely with these founders and I get to see a lot of the challenges that they experience on a day-to-day basis. So happy to expand on that. There's a lot of pitfalls that I see entrepreneurs made in the early days. And I've made it kind of my mission to help optimize the chances that folks become successful.
Wow, that's amazing. Okay, well, let's jump right in. Okay, so as an early founder, what are some of the things what is the first thing you look at
That's a great question. So let me maybe paint a picture. Here's what I typically see, right? Generally speaking, folks will have an idea, or they would have lived a particular problem in a past life that they really are passionate about and want to solve, which is why they kind of decide that there's a company that needs to be solving this problem. And generally, what they'll do is that they'll go and maybe acquire their first customers through just their own network, right? Because generally speaking, if you come from a place, you usually have some early customers, and then they go about finding out what the core challenges are, so they can build the product, and then go out and fundraise. Now, all of that sounds pretty good. The problem usually, before you even start thinking about your go-to-market, is when you actually look at the data. 42% of the time, the reason companies fail is that there's no market need, right? So order of business number one is not to just validate that the problem that you're trying to solve is real. Order of business number one is to validate that there's enough customers that actually experience that problem for you to be able to build a business of a decent size, especially if you're trying to build the type of business that's venture scale, where you're going to be asking investors for investment. The first thing that they'll do is take a look at the market, and they're not going to look at your beautiful pitch deck slide where you're saying, hey, it's a $20 billion market, massive opportunity. What we actually do is that we actually think about who are your actual customers, how many of them are there, and then we do something called bottom-up market sizing, which is just really getting a sense of the market by actually looking at the number of customers times how much we think you can actually charge for those customers. That's one pitfall that I would say is maybe, if I consider all the pitfalls, probably the biggest one that I find founders make. And sometimes you might get investments and get all the way to the point where you're trying to scale the company, only to realize that there's not enough customers out there. So if I were to if I were to just kind of maybe leave everybody with just kind of one piece of advice, is before even thinking about who you're selling to, before even thinking about how you're selling to them, you do need to validate that your customers exist in the first place.
Yeah. And that makes sense, I mean, if you have no customers, you have no business.
Exactly.
Simple as that.
Sounds obvious, but a lot of people fall into that trap.
Yeah, I could see that many people want to have a business, and the business idea is great, and they're excited about it, but they miss that very important point. Do you really have any customers out there that need what you have or what you're offering?
Bingo.
That's amazing. Totally different way of looking at things.
Yeah.
Yes. Wow. So how do you identify your customer?
Yeah. So provided that you, so here's kind of, and this is where my technical background, I think, comes into play. I think we're very used to, as entrepreneurs, because a lot of folks that build companies typically come from a product background or a technical background, generally speaking, or some kind of lived experience, and they understand the problem intimately. And generally speaking, we have this mindset that on the product side, you have to experiment, right? So what people don't usually realize is that you kind of have to experiment as well on the go-to-market side, early stage. And it is okay to do things that don't scale early stage, even on the go-to-market side. But here's an exercise that I actually get my founders to go through once they kind of start working with us is, really, you've got an idea and you think that there's a particular problem that exists in the world that you want to solve. I try to get founders to think in a very detailed way about who they think their ideal customer profile might look like or might be, right? And generally, it's not just one idea. It's 1, 2, 3 types of customer segments that you think, I think these guys might benefit from this solution. When your job number one is to actually get out of the building, right? Or pick up the phone and talk to 20, 30 customers in each segment. And what you're trying to do there is that you're trying to get a sense of which of these customers have the most experience a problem in the most acute way, mostly because they're the ones that are going to be wanting to solve that problem. So generally, this could look like customers that are using some type of workaround, right, to deal with that problem. Or it could be that they're paying, external parties to deal with this. So it's a service, not a product. There's a lot of things that you can kind of look at. But the motion is really about understanding if you were to now decide which one of those three segments has the highest utility for this product and the most willingness to pay for it. That's when you can go, okay, I've talked to segment A, segment B, segment C. Based on the initial conversations, I think we should focus on segment B, right? And so have an idea of what your ideal customer profile is, have an idea of who your buyers are, right? Not just your users, because sometimes you'll have this dynamic where users will tell you about the things that are issues for them from a day-to-day standpoint, whereas their bosses and the buyers are actually worried about and thinking about what business value does this product bring for me, right? And generally speaking, it really generally comes in four flavors. It's either you're helping them make money, or you're helping them save money, or you're helping them mitigate some kind of risk, or you're helping them with productivity or improve some type of experience, right? And if you can hone in on the right things, then you're able to tell a story about how, the world looks like this today. These are the challenges that you have. And if we were to address those challenges, here's some of the benefits that you're going to get from doing that. And here's the impact that you will have, especially in this day and age where companies across the board, because we're in a bit of a market downturn, are not buying things that are nice to haves. They're buying things that are must haves. So as a founder in the current environment, you must make sure that you're not just talking about, hey, where should the buttons be on my product? I mean, you still need to figure that out, right? But what's even more important is to really know what value the customer that you've got in front of you is going to get out of this.
Okay. Yes. So providing value. And that's, it should be a no-brainer, but it still needs to be identified.
Bingo.
Yeah.
And I think too, many people are caught up in the overwhelm or the backwash, whatever, of the whole entrepreneurial scene. Everybody wants to be an entrepreneur. And so many people have come up with some wonderful products. But people are also, like you said, it's about what you need. It's about needs. And as people look at all of this available information and quote unquote opportunity, many people are pulling back now and saying, do I really need that? Or is this someone who just, they have a great idea. It's a great company, but I don't need it right now. I need to pull back and look at other things, other factors, other than going out and purchasing something else. I'm talking a lot about, there's so many entrepreneurs, and they have great products to help you learn how to sell, help you learn how to contact customers, to speak, whatever you want. There's a program out there that somebody's selling, okay?
Yeah.
Many people are pulling back and saying, what do I really need? Or am I just going to spend another $10,000 on something that's not going to work? So that's, I think, that's the gap that people are looking to fill. They want to make sure that if they're going to expend this amount of money, that it's going to actually benefit what it is that they're doing. They don't want just another program. They're not just not out there to spend money, to be spending money.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So the reason why it's important too, because customers will vote with their wallets, right, at the end of the day. And the reason why it's also critical to make sure that you're you're targeting the customers that will get the most value. So the fact that, so you're not in a market downturn forever, right? And also the fact that a customer might not be experiencing the problem in an acute way today doesn't mean that they're not going to experience it in an acute way tomorrow, right? Mm-hmm. But part of the job is also because as a founder, you need to be thinking about not just kind of what you're doing, but there's also this dynamic where you just have some cash in the bank, not a lot usually when you're early stage. So you have to be very mindful of your runway, right? Mm-hmm. And wasting time early stage on customers that are not going to close, or customers that are not the right target for your product, has actually a negative effect as well. And this is not, a lot of people don't really connect those dots there. But the second reason, so earlier I mentioned that the first reason companies fail is that there is no market need. Guess what the second reason was? The second reason is that they run out of cash. Right. So the main reason you really want to make sure that you really spend the time to figure out who your early ICP should be before you even try to go too fancy, is to really make sure that you're targeting the ones that will close the fastest, and you're targeting the ones that will help you prove out what you need to prove out, so that you don't run out of cash by the time you need to go out and fundraise again.
Mm. Okay, well, that definitely
do that. How do you
and that goes back to researching your market, like you talked about earlier.
Right.
Yeah.
But generally, so just to be clear, I know that it sounds daunting, but I think if I like to kind of simplify it in just kind of a few kind of steps. Really, I kind of think of it as a 5-stage process in a way, because when you think about what you're doing, first, you're confirming that there is a real market pain, which is kind of what I was talking about, right? So you're going out there and talking to 20, 30 customers, mostly to validate that the problem that you think exists in the world actually exists in the world, and there's enough customers that experience that problem, right? So that's kind of what I think of as stage 1. Then stage 2 is now you've focused on one particular segment where okay, this is my initial wedge, this is my initial target. Then you're probably going to go and find more customers at, say, 40 to 50 other prospect conversations. And really the reason you're having those conversations is to understand more about the problem, because what you're actually trying to do at that point is starting to narrow in on specific high priority problems, so that the next stage, which is stage 4, will be to start iterating on a solution. So some folks will start building product. I don't advise that. I advise just kind of there's a lot of tools out there that you can use to mock up a product. You can use Figma, you can use even PowerPoints to just kind of show your customer, hey, this is what we're actually thinking in terms of a solution. Would love your feedback, right? So you don't actually need to write a single line of code generally in order to validate that. Then once you get to a point where you're starting to hear the same things from customers, and you're generally hearing the validation that this is the thing that will help solve our problem, then that's when the sales motion actually starts, right? Now it's there's a subtle thing that happens here, because what I find that most entrepreneurs think is that the early conversations are a sales process, because you would think, oh, I've done a first call with this customer to identify their pain point. Then I've done a second call with this customer to demo a product. I should send them pricing now. No, it's not the right time to be sending the pricing. What you've done so far is that you validated that you may have a customer that's the right potential fit in front of you. I would argue that that's when your actual sales process starts, because now are you validating, are you actually qualifying to figure out, okay, so it sounds like we can solve this company's pain point, but is there a budget there? Do we have the right people involved? How long would it actually take to convert this into a pilot or an actual sale, right? When you think about it that way. And generally speaking, that means that what you're doing is that maybe you started with 20 customers that were interested. And now that you understand their own internal situation a little bit more, you know that maybe there's only 10 of them that you should target. And once you target those 10, I guarantee you, you'll only close maybe like, 3 or 4 of them, right? But that's kind of how that goes, right?
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. That's deep. That's a lot to think about for sure. So how do people work with you before we move forward?
Yeah, we work with companies at the very, very early stages, meaning that generally when we see an interesting team working on an interesting, now we're a venture capital firm, so we tend to focus on companies that are solving problems that could potentially be venture scale, meaning that the market opportunity has to be very large, right, for us to kind of come in. But generally speaking, what I'd say we're very good at is helping founders with the early traction and really figuring out go to market. As a matter of fact, that's a lot of what I do with our portfolio companies. I almost act as a fractional sales leader to them, really helping them through building their own playbook and going through some of the stages that I just mentioned. And we're really good at also helping entrepreneurs fundraise, because one thing that is maybe not as obvious is that there is such a thing as the right way to fundraise, right? And repeat founders will know the game, but the reality is you have to have a great narrative. You have to position things in a certain way. There's a lot that you actually need to learn in order to get fundraising ready. And we work with our founders really closely to ensure that they've got the right pitch. And we also introduce them to our network of follow-on investors that will then help them get to the next stage. I'm pretty accessible on LinkedIn and other places, but Form VC, that's the website, formvc.com. If you go on there, you'll see a big pitch us button that we have on the top of the page. By all means, we'll look at early stage companies all the time. We're more than happy to see whether we can partner with you guys.
Okay.
Well, let me ask you something, because I've heard you say that, there has to be you have your parameters for working with people. So what is your parameter, or how would you describe the early stage customer that you would be willing to work with?
The early stage like company that we invest in, or the early stage? Gotcha. Yeah. So it's actually, it's going to be a broad answer because we are a generalist fund. So we don't tend to focus on just particular verticals. But what I would say is, if you're an early founding team, and you have at least validated with some early customer conversations that there's a real thing to work on there, and the market is large enough, at that point, we're ready to talk to you, right? Because our job is to help you take that vision and concept and get you to the next level. Now, we do work with companies that already have a product built or already have some customers. In the current environment as well, as you may have seen in the news or heard, it's a tough environment out there economically, but also on the venture capital side of things as well. So deal volume is down. Founders are finding it much harder to fundraise in the current environment. But really what we're seeing is that companies that are building in AI have the ability to fundraise even when they're very early, but everybody else has to actually prove out that they have a real business before going out to fundraise, right? So more and more, we're actually working with companies later stage, because most venture funds today will try to at least make sure that you've got 100 or 200,000 worth, like in revenue, to give them the conviction that folks are actually, paying for your product and actually getting value from it. Whereas if you went back to 2-3 years ago, some folks could get investments with just a nice story and a big smile and a pitch deck. That's not the world that we live in anymore.
So you guys are sort of like Shark Tank. Yes, it's a tough world out there now in terms of getting venture capital to move to your next level. Because people want to make sure they're putting their money in the right place.
Exactly.
And they're going to get a return on their money. So that's key now. Wow.
Yeah.
So basically, the sales strategy of an early company, you kind of touched on it. All of the profile stuff you need to do and things like that. Now, you've done all of that stuff. and you're ready for your sales.
Yeah.
What does that look like?
So that's the interesting transition, right? Because in the early conversation, generally what you do is you have an idea. So mostly you're just kind of seeking feedback, right? Quite often what you do is that you reach out to prospective customers and say, hey, I've got this idea and I would love your feedback on it. And you have a conversation about the problem. Then once you've got a product, then you go, hey, I've built a mock-up of our product, would love your feedback on it, right? So that's more of a feedback motion, and generally customers will be more open to share during that motion. So there's a subtle pivot that you need to do once you're at that stage where you're now trying to get these customers to kind of potentially, sign on the dotted line, right? And this is kind of what I meant by you have to qualify the customer. Generally speaking, you kind of go, a conversation might go something along the lines of, hey, we've had a couple conversations so far, and based on what you've shared with me and based on your feedback so far, I think we could definitely add some value to what you guys are doing there and solve this problem for you. We're going to be working with a select group of 10 customers over the next 6 months. And these are the customers that are gonna work alongside us to help us build the product. Obviously, there's going to be some incentives there. It's going to be, you're going to get grandfathered pricing. You get to really have your voice in terms of how we build the product. So paint a picture, because what you're actually selling to them, remember, you don't have a product yet, right? So what you actually have to sell to them is a partnership. And the way that you sell the partnership is by painting the picture of what the partnership would entail. Mm-hmm. And then and only then do you actually put the onus on them to say, is this a time frame that you think you can meet? Because I don't know what's going on in your organization internally. So maybe tell me about whether you guys have any budget set aside for this. Who would we need to talk to in order to make this happen? All of those things. And notice how I'm now switching to a sales type of conversation where I'm actually qualifying. But really, the reason I do this is that it goes back to what I was saying about not wasting time with customers that are not the right customers to focus on. This is a very good way to enable them to self-select out of the process, because they'll tell you, you know what, we've got 2-3 other initiatives going on. I don't think that we'll be able to look at this until next year. And you go, okay, no problem. We'll add you to the list, to the next list once we release the product. And you'll have other folks that will say, I think we're really struggling with this. Let me find out, right? Notice how now I'm not really the one doing the selling. It's the champion that I have in front of me, and you do need a champion in these deals, is the champion that you got in front of you that's actually helping you figure out how to actually bring the product into the organization. So it's a subtle pivot that you do from seeking feedback to seeking alignment. But once you're there, you're actually in a sales process, because the person comes back and goes, I had a conversation internally. These things need to be true for us to do this. This is what we can do. This is how much budget we can spare. And then you're actually talking real, real money, as opposed to a process where you just kind of talked about the problem, showed them a demo, and all of a sudden you think, oh, let me share with you pricing and see whether these guys will convert. That's not the motion. That's a motion when you actually have a product built and an established business. It's not a motion when you're actually in the what people call the 0 to 1 phase, which is you haven't really gotten to that product market fit yet. You're still experimenting, and you're still trying to get a good idea of what the right product or company should be.
Wow.
Yeah, this is a very interesting conversation. I can imagine that many people who will listen or are listening will say to themselves, I think I kind of jumped the gun.
Yep. Hey, you know what? I was a founder too. I was in their shoes, and I made the exact same mistakes. Right? It's just that I have the luxury to be working with so many companies, and I've actually been a founder myself and been part of a company that was successful. So learned a lot, and really what I'm trying to do is just kind of pay it forward.
Yes, and that's good to know. Again, if companies want to work with you, how do they do so?
Go to formvc.com or reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty easy to find. There isn't a lot of me on there. Bocar, Bocar, Dia, Dia. And I'm always happy to point founders in the right direction.
Yes. Well, we have definitely have to do this again because we want to definitely get into the nitty gritties. And you did an excellent job of explaining all the different phases. And we appreciate so much you sharing that with our audience and us, because now I've got things to think about.
Anytime. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.